This happened literally a month ago, back in February, when my boyfriend and I had decided to try out an open relationship for a little while, for various reasons. We live separately in one of the larger cities in the north of Middle America, and there is a decently sized population of college students, like me, to keep the gay community fresh, so I was doing pretty well for myself. One night, I was bored and scrolling through Grindr, looking for an easy hookup, when I got a message from a guy who was barely 800 feet away. He wasn't terrible looking, and I was a little desperate, so I agreed to go to his place. He lives quite literally down the street from me. I can see his building from my window, so I walked over, and he let me up and into his apartment. We made small talk, and I mentioned where I lived. Heck, I even pointed out my window from one of the windows in the stairwell. From the first, I thought there was something off about the guy. Not necessarily bad, just different. An odd twitch in his hands when he gripped the banister, the vacancy of his eyes when he smiled. I'm not so cliche as to say he felt evil or anything like that, but I wasn't exactly surprised that, after we got to his apartment, the first thing he did was to tell his very pretty and friendly cat to say hello, and the second thing he did was walk over to the kitchen counter, grab a needle, and shoot up. I hadn't even closed the door behind me. I stood there, staring, and he turned around, dropped the needle on the counter, and went, "Oh, man, shoulda asked. You cool with that?" I'm not a good Christian boy. I have broken into church while tripping on LSD. I had relations on a headstone back in high school, but I have my standards. So I shook my head mutely, pulled my hat back on, and opened the door to leave. The guy rushed over and put a hand on my shoulder. "Yo, I'm sorry. You don't gotta go. We don't gotta fool around. Do you want to watch Transformers 3 with me or something?" "Nope," I said bluntly, hustling away down the stairs. I bundled up my scarf against the early February chill and hurried back down the street to my apartment. He followed me downstairs, barefoot, in pajama pants and a t-shirt, until I stepped outside into the whipping winds. I turned back briefly to look after a moment, and he was still standing there in the doorway, watching me. I didn't have any premonitions of doom or weirdness. I grew up in Missouri. Junkies barely register as odd to me by this point, so I went home and went to bed. Now, you might have guessed it, but I'd never seen this dude around the neighborhood before. Truthfully, I hadn't seen most of my neighbors because my neighborhood is an odd mixture of white-collar suburbia, college housing, and low-income housing like my paramour's building, all on one street. So it didn't really register when I started seeing him more. I would leave for work in the afternoon, and he'd be on the other avenue across from my building, strolling along. Or he'd cut across my building's parking lot like all the kids in the neighborhood did. A couple of times I saw him walking across the campus mall. My apartment building is directly adjacent to my campus. But he'd always swerve to avoid me. Once or twice I noticed him in the grocery store, where I work as a barista, but it's the only one within walking distance, and he mentioned he didn't have a car. This went on for the entire month of February. Eventually, I started noticing. He'd always be walking down the street opposite my building when I left for work at my usual time, and he was only ever at the store when I was working. He'd never approach the coffee stand within the store, but he'd look at me. A couple times I noticed him enter, look at me, pretend to shop, and then leave without buying anything. I was starting to feel creeped out, but he hadn't done anything yet to make me feel particularly unsafe. One day, late February, I worked an early shift. When I got off, I felt a little crazy from the lack of sleep, and I reached my place about 20 minutes before I usually leave for work. On the corner of the sidewalk opposite me was the guy. He was checking his watch over and over and looking up. I did a bit of brilliant deductive analysis and followed his gaze up to my living room window. Then I looked back down at him. He looked right at me. There was a moment of tension as we stared each other in the eyes. Like I said, this dude didn't give off any evil or dark vibes. I've met people that do. No, what I saw in this guy's eyes and his face was much more human and much scarier. Desperation, loneliness, pain, and anger. He hurried after me, but I'm 6'3" and a former sprinter, whereas he was a 5'8" junkie wearing flip-flops on ice. I made it to the first set of doors to my apartment, scanned myself in through the second, and locked them behind me. He walked through the unlocked first set, tried to open the second, tried pushing the handicap button to open them, and then gave up. "Look, man, I'm sorry," he shouted, laying a hand on the glass of the door. "Can we talk about it?" I shook my head. "Absolutely not. Leave me alone." Then I whirled on my heel and stomped over to the elevator. When I turned back, he was gone out into the snow. I didn't see him for a couple weeks afterward, which is nice because my boyfriend likes to walk down the street past the dude's apartment when he stays over and needs to go smoke. One night, my boyfriend was over at my place. He'd just gone out to smoke before we went to bed, and he mentioned that he wanted me to come with him the next time he went out. "Why?" I asked, pulling him in close to me while he shivered. "It's dark and cold, and I get paranoid out there sometimes," he mumbled into my chest. "There's this creepy dude that sometimes stands on the corner across the way and just stares at the building. One time he asked me for a cig, and I told him I didn't have one when I had one literally in my hand. He laughed, kissed my chin, and passed out. I laid there awake, troubled. When I was sure my boyfriend was asleep, meaning after about 5 minutes had passed, I extracted myself and went to the window. It was a cold, clear night. I could see across the street, under the orange glow of the streetlight, was the guy. I couldn't make him out clearly, but when he saw me, he waved. I flipped him off and closed the blinds. I didn't feel like I should tell my boyfriend because he was either going to go immediately to the police, which I hate doing, or he'd try and defend me. And while I love him with my entire heart, I don't want to watch a fight between a junkie stalker and my underweight, nicotine-addicted boyfriend. So I kept it to myself and still haven't told him. But I did start accompanying him when he went out to smoke. The guy was usually outside. Sometimes he'd follow us for a bit before ducking away down a side street. Sometimes he'd watch from a distance. Sometimes he'd be up in his apartment. My boyfriend never noticed. I kept my composure and nothing happened. One night, though, we went out so my boyfriend could smoke like normal. When he'd reached the end of the street and turned around, the stalker was behind us, about 50 feet back. I turned my head to check, and there he was. He waved at me again, and something told me I had to get back inside. "Hey babe," I said quietly to my boyfriend. "Let's get back inside, yeah? I'm cold." "Aw, baby," he said, kissing me on the cheek. "Okay, I'm almost done anyway." We walked back to the apartment building, and without turning, I knew the stalker was behind us the entire time. I kept my hand intertwined with my boyfriend's and kept up the casual conversation we'd been having about how I hate geese. We got back up to my apartment, and he got changed for bed while I grabbed some water. So I've never lived in an apartment before, and I don't know if it's odd or not, but this building has a wired telephone in each unit that rings when someone wants let in. Ours never rings unless it's Uber Eats. So my boyfriend was surprised when it started ringing late at night, when neither of us had ordered anything. "Probably just some jerk playing a prank," I said, unhooking the phone from the wall and putting it in the kitchen cabinet. He accepted that without a struggle, and we laid down in bed. After he was soundly out, I got up, got dressed, grabbed a couple things, and headed downstairs in my thick winter coat. Sure enough, my fanboy was out there, in the parking lot. He waved at me and jogged over, smiling broadly. "Hey, man." "What do you want?" I said flatly. "Look, man, I feel like we ended things awkwardly last time, and I just wanted to talk to you," he said. "So you stalked me?" "What?" He started to look angrier, his brows furrowing. "Nah, man, I didn't stalk you. I just wanted to know when I could talk to you, but you always avoid me. Now you're walking around out here with that skinny little boy, trying to rub it in my face, and I don't appreciate that." "Look, man," he said, smiling again, stepping closer. "You want to go talk about this back at my place? Ditch the boy and come hang out with me tonight? Please? I won't shoot up or nothing this time." He took another step closer to me. I saw, in his right hand, a dully gleaming piece of metal, a folded-up switchblade. He smiled at me, and I stepped back, shaking my head. His smile drained away into a deep scowl. "I'm done asking. You're going to come over to my place now and finish what we started," he growled, unfolding the knife and pointing it at me. This dude was 5'8" tops and skinny. I am 6'3", 200 pounds, and regularly lift weights. Also, I had a 12-inch kitchen knife which I drew from my coat pocket and leveled it at his throat. He looked at my knife and then back at his and smiled again. Bro, I was just playing. We can just talk right here, bro. Leave me and my boyfriend alone, I said very quietly, or I will cut your face off and eat it. What? I spent 8 years in juvie for stabbing a kid in middle school, I lied. He backed up, putting the knife back in his pocket. I took a step closer, holding my knife level. He backed away, quickly, almost falling on the ice, until he was fully sprinting back to his place, and I was chasing him down with my knife, until he crossed the street and I stopped. I slid the knife into my pocket and watched him run back to his building. Then I went back up to my bedroom, told my boyfriend I just had to go pee, and fell asleep. So, nameless, horny junkie, let's not meet again, or I'll eat your face. I was a fool to think this job was just a job. Everything from the advertisement to going and actually applying was way too trivial and inviting. I'm just trying to tell myself that I'm going to be okay, but I just don't know. I have some time before it happens, so I'll try to explain how effed I actually am. In light of the pandemic that's been going around for more than a year at this point, I was extremely tight on money. Having moved out of my parents' house right before Corona started shutting down businesses, and any possible sources of income for me was bad enough. But being a college student on top of that was absolutely not helping my case. For the longest time after leaving California, I lived in one of those $15 a night ran-down motels while attending ASU, and life was undeniably a struggle. Cheap housing was fine. I could tolerate the dank and stained mattresses provided in the rooms. Granted, I had been smart enough to take some washable sheets and comforters, as well as Febreze from home. I probably washed those daily because of how hot it'd get in those old, barely ventilated rooms. The real problem came from the crime. In the city of Tempe, Arizona, there were almost 1,000 cases of burglary in the year 2019 alone. Now, granted, at that time, the stat didn't scare me because I thought I'd be living in the dorms on campus. So, me as a high school senior thought nothing of it. But here I am. 4 nights before I ended up in my current situation, there was a case of breaking and entering reported from the floor under mine. Someone was apparently abducted and had literally everything taken. The only items that remained were their toothbrush, still neatly placed by the sink of the small bathroom attached, and a key to the room, which had the name of the person staying there scribbled onto the paper tab. Even their bed sheets were taken, strangely enough. Maybe criminals need hostages and clean bed sheets. Needless to say, that was enough motivation for me to start making some better financial decisions. I went to 4 job interviews over the course of the next 3 days. I was turned down by all 4. They said I lacked intuition. Yesterday morning, however, I came across a neatly organized advertisement online from a company by the name of MORD. The bold font stood out from my computer screen detailing, "No expertise required, great pay, call for interview." From the other advertisements I was looking at, I chose to pursue this one. I felt almost as if it was calling to me, or maybe it was beckoning my bank account. I called there, and then, after a few rings of the dial tone, the sound of a young woman came through. "Hello there, are you calling about the job advertisements we put out recently?" she asked gingerly. "Oh, hey, yeah, actually I am. I would like to schedule an interview for later today." I stumbled with my words. At times I found it hard to talk to people, and then quarantine was not helping me be any less socially awkward. Is that all right?" I asked cautiously. "Oh, eager are we now? That's no problem. Can I have your name? It's for our filing purposes," she responded, clicking keys on her keyboard. She responded quickly. It somehow made my brain tick, but I ignored it as best I could. Yeah, it'll be Jason Brody. Fabulous. I could practically feel that woman smirking at me. The rest of the phone call was somewhat uneventful. I was told the job was hosted in a town somewhat far away from Tempe. For your own safety, I won't tell you which town. I was told I could show up to their facility around 8 p.m. This left me with the rest of the day to contemplate my decision. I had somehow just realized I didn't even ask what I would be doing at the job. I didn't ask for the girl's name either. Come to think of it, I have never heard of a company by the name of MORD owning such a big plot of land out where they were located. What did MORD even stand for? At that point, I couldn't really care less. I had dollar signs waving in my face, so I hastily went for it. Too bad, so sad, I thought, as I went to prepare for later. I gathered the best clothes I could and took the evening bus to a stop relatively close to the property. Their facility was sizable, reminiscent of an office building situated out away from everything. It was essentially a desert out here, even though the more urban areas were probably 45 minutes away. Still, there were some buildings scattered out along the road. MORD's, however, was strangely pronounced. Compared to the other dusty buildings, this one looked weirdly clean and pristine. As I got to the front entrance of the building, I was greeted with a reception area. The walls were painted in a bright and reflective shade of white, with black trim which met a marvelous red carpet with thick black and white patterns etched into it. It reminded me of a casino show floor. In the mostly empty and spacious room, there were white leather couches, some pillars spread equally across the expanse of the room, and some houseplants in the corners. A young blonde girl worked the front desk. "Mr. Brody, I presume?" called the girl. "Yeah, I'm here. You must be who I spoke with earlier," I responded, doing my best not to stutter. Although the girl's facial features were hidden by a blue surgical mask, she seemed pleasant. Her nameplate read Anna, not even a last name. "All right, if you walk down that hall over there, it'll be the first room to the right." She pointed a finger to a hallway to the right of me. "Much thanks," I replied. By her voice, I assumed she was probably in her early 20s, probably working the same lame job to gather money, similar to how I was. Inside of the room was a wooden desk and some chairs. The decorative pattern of the lobby also seemed to flow into office rooms as well. On the desk laid a piece of paper and an envelope. Cautiously, I took up the paper. It read, MORD, insert address here, room 2. Good evening, Jason. It is truly unfortunate that I couldn't see you in person before you start. As you should know by now, you will be working overnight in our facility as an overnight guard. As mentioned in the advertisement, the pay should be satisfactory. You will receive $1,500 US per working night. If you couldn't tell by my phrasing, you have already been hired. You will start tonight. Your job is quite easy as long as you follow the company rules. The envelope next to this page should contain said rules. Failure to comply with these rules may lead to unforeseen consequences for you, so be sure to work diligently. Your uniform can be found on the chair behind you in the corner. You will find your post for tonight using the map of the building provided on the back of this page. Be at your post by 11:30 p.m. tonight. You may spend the time leading up to your shift in any way you'd like. Do not go downstairs. Aaron. I laughed at the last comment. Way to be ominous, I thought. It was about 8 p.m. then, so I decided to get some rest in before my shift. I slept in the chair where I had originally picked up my uniform. The pay was enough to cover my tuition in a matter of weeks. No way I was turning back. My alarm rang at 11:20 p.m. I shot up, put on my uniform, and followed the detailed fire escape route map of the building to my post. Aaron had kindly used a red marker to guide me through the hallways. I arrived at my post by 11:26 p.m., just enough time for me to take a quick glance at the rules. I figured that since I had been hired on the spot, I was in no rush to fret over these. The paper contained a list of 14 rules. The first rules were modest. Rule number 1. From a time period of 11:30 p.m. to the end of your shift at 6 a.m., You must walk the grounds floor's perimeter twice. You may choose the intervals at which these patrols happen. Easy. Rule number 2. From a time period of 2 a.m. to 3:33 a.m., you must take a patrol of the second floor. Walking the perimeter suffices as a patrol. Oddly specific. Rule number 3. You will also be tasked with observing the CCTV cameras stationed around the building. If you observe anything you would consider abnormal, please use the phone in your room to contact the front desk. They will know what to do. The connection number is 999. I sighed. It's whatever, I thought. Must be some new guy hazing ritual. Reminds me of when my old burger joint used to decorate for Halloween. Oddly spooky. I laughed internally. Maybe they're just reusing some old supplies from Halloween. It's March, though. I shrugged it off. Taking a look at my watch, it was now 11:30. I was officially on the clock. Looking up, I observed the room I had been stationed in. In contrast with other rooms on the first floor, the red carpet that had been present throughout the greater part of the building did not go past the doorframe. Rather, this room had a bleak gray carpet, a color reminiscent of wet concrete. The walls of this room were faded white, numerous maroon stains laid in contrast from the color of the wall. Some long stains even followed into the ceiling. Exactly across from the metal door was an industrial metal table. On the table sat 12 monitors, stacked 4x3. Next to the pile laid a beige office phone. In the corner of the room to my right were 4 blue lockers. In the other corner of the room there was a small yellow bin with something black inside of it. Classy. Flipping around, I decided to go out for my first patrol right off the bat. I took the envelope with the rules and kept reading. Rule number 4. For your own safety, before exiting your room for a patrol, look through all of the camera feeds. Then refer to rule number 3. Well, crap. I found it almost comical that this company was talking about my safety. After all, aren't I supposed to be the most dangerous thing in the building? I'm pretty sure I saw a baton in the bin. I didn't grab it though. I found it funny how I kept messing up. Legitimately comical. Rule number 5. While on patrol, you might encounter rooms where the doors are open and people are seemingly moving inside, but the lights inside the room are turned off. Do not enter these rooms. Do not shine your flashlight in these rooms. They don't like light. I stopped dead in my tracks, almost falling over with how hard I planted my feet into the ground. I read the rule over 2 more times, thinking I had misinterpreted it or something. I started to feel the creeping sensation of fear enter my body. Logically, this had to be a prank. Had to. I had too many thoughts to portray onto this note, but I kept reading. Rule number 6. If you are on patrol and you encounter one of these rooms, and something seems to be exiting the room, do not look at it. If you must, stare at the ground and walk backwards until you can turn around and get back to your room quickly. Refer to rule number 3 before finishing that round of patrol. Rule number 7. If you are in your room and you hear scratching at your door, almost as if a pet were beckoning to be let in, do not open the door. If the scratches intensify, you must ignore them. Do not attempt to look out the small window in the door. It is best if you keep your back to the door. Rule number 8. If you notice that one of the cameras in your room has gone black or has started to show static, you must take the baton that was provided to you and smash the screen of the monitor. It can get in, otherwise. Try to smash only the screen. The top of the monitor frame is labeled accordingly to where the camera was displaying. You must avoid that area whenever patrolling. Rule number 9. If you sense something is following you, run into your room. Chances are, it can't get past the door. Rule number 10. If something manages to break into your room, remain completely and utterly still wherever you are and drop whatever you are doing. Do not open your eyes. It will try to coerce you. Rule number 11. At no point before 6 a.m. should you consider leaving the premises of the building. You are locked in for your safety. I sharply inhaled upon the realization that I was locked in. This was undeniably the fastest my heart has ever beat. I was practically gagging on my own tongue. I wanted to say something and calm myself down, but I couldn't find the words. I managed to get a hold of myself soon after, until the ground floor's lights shut off. I was surrounded by darkness. I stumbled backwards a few steps to find the wall of the hallway. I was utterly blinded by the darkness. I fumbled with the utility belt of my uniform, trying to find which small pocket housed a flashlight. I got a hold of it after a moment, switched it on, and all I could think was to look around me. Wide-eyed, I'd turned several 360s before considering taking a step forward to trudge onward. The lights must be on a timer, I thought, shining my light onto my black analog watch. The time read 11:40 p.m. This is absolutely terrible. As subtle as a mouse, I crept onward. In a foot race, an ant probably could have beat me to the end of the hallway. I hadn't realized it before, but this building was quite expansive. In each hallway there seemed to be doorways to at least 25 rooms total, and the hallways were probably each 150 feet long. The building was laid out like a grid, with hallways connecting at certain intervals every now and then, making it easy to navigate since there were all right angles. Having not encountered anything for the first 10 minutes of creeping, I quickened my pace to a slow walk. Surprisingly, I made a complete perimeter of the ground floor in about 45 minutes, while not having seen anything. Perhaps it's because I didn't dare make a sound or look at anything but the hallway in front of me, but I made it back to my room safe. I peered around the room. Nothing seemed to be hiding inside. Stepping in, I closed the door behind me. My watch read 12:44 a.m. Suddenly, the office phone on the table blared its ringtone. Almost stumbling over from a heart attack, I inched closer to the phone. I put my hand on the handle and held the speaker to my ear. The voice of a man came through. "Hello, how are you?" asked the man in a deep and slow voice. It's good. Who are you?" Ignoring my question, the man continued, "What do you believe in?" Static from the phone erupted briefly. "Wait, what do you mean?" I was sufficiently flustered. Like religion? I'm atheist." There was a brief pause. "What is your name?" asked the man. He sounded cold and lifeless now. There was no inflection left in his voice. His breaths were shallow, like his diaphragm could no longer push enough air out of his mouth. Jason?" The man's voice became distorted past what I could ever possibly try to describe. It was similar to someone choking or gargling on some thick liquid. It hurt my heart to hear somehow, but it was talking to me through this distortion. I didn't know what it was saying. The phone line cut. It was eerily silent around me now, and then it dinged on me. I whipped the envelope out and scanned the rules for anything mentioning a phone. I read, "Rule number 13. If the phone in your station begins to ring, you must answer it. Answer any questions it may ask. If it hangs up before you do, resume duties. If it asks for your name, do not answer. Hang up and resume duties." My heart dropped. I really had nothing running through my head right at the moment, other than dread. From the silence came a knock at the room's door. I flipped around instantly to face it. Before taking a step forward, I looked at the paper with the rules again. Rule number 14. If there is knocking coming from the door to your room, it is most likely the result of not following one of the previous mentioned rules. Refer to rule number 7. If the handle on the door begins to jiggle, refer to rule 10. I looked up to the door. The handle of the door had silently been turning, and I had not noticed. I gasped and dropped the envelope somewhere on the ground from surprise. I instantly shut my eyes and crouched down, trying to find it, by feeling the ground. I heard the door start to creak open, its metal hinges squeaking. Planting both hands on the carpet, I prepared for what was about to unfold. What I felt at first was a strange aura. It became seemingly colder inside of the room, but my body remained warm. Strange sensations coated my arms and legs, the kind where it tingles and you'd expect to find a spider crawling on you, but there's nothing there. My head felt unfathomably hot compared to the other parts of my body. That's when it spoke. Its voice was reminiscent to that of the thing that spoke to me on the phone. However, it was not gargling. It had the same vocal tone as the thing on the phone, but this time it spoke with inflection and an accent. It sounded human. "Hey, it's okay. Open your eyes and come with me." It repeated that phrase several times, and then, almost as if it were perplexed by why I wasn't responding, it started speaking again, this time in German. And then in what I assumed to be Russian, and then in an Asian language I did not recognize. And then it went silent, but the feeling in my body was still present, along with the intense cramping of my muscles. I did not dare open my eyes. I remained in my crouched position for what seemed like an eternity. When the sensations in my body subsided, I finally mustered up the courage to open my eyes. There was no monster, from anything I could see. The door remained wide open. The light that illuminated my small room of salvation spilled into the hallway outside. I shot up and closed the door as quickly and quietly as I could, somehow thinking that it might still be outside somewhere. I don't remember exactly how I felt, but deprived from oxygen from forgetting to breathe is somewhat accurate. I was sweating profusely and trying to get a hold of my breath. My watch read 1:02 a.m. Spotting the envelope on the ground, I bent over and went to review the rules. Glancing over the ones I've already read, I recalled the cameras. Looking to the table, I began to switch on all the monitors one by one with the small on-off button next to the label of where the camera was shooting. All camera feeds displayed seemingly still images of the long dark hallways, except for one, which displayed one room in a hallway with the lights on inside. I figured this must have been the camera shooting footage of my hallway, and that illuminated room was the one I was in. The label on the monitor read Hallway 4, correlating that to the map Aaron had given me. It seemed I was mistaken. I was located in Hallway 3. Seeing as none of the rules I had read so far mentioned the lights being on, I looked down to the phone to call the front desk. Before picking up the receiver, I hesitated, almost as if the monster from earlier would start asking questions again, but I dialed 9 3 times, and a dial tone began to sound. After 3 tones, the voice of a young man came through. "Hello, front desk representative speaking." He spoke with a distinct southern accent. "Hey, there's in hallway number 4, there's a room with the light on," I responded, trying to keep it together. Almost snottily, the man retorted, "Is that truly abnormal? There are consequences for calling this line without a reason." I did not enjoy his tone. "You listen to me. I have seen my fair share of abnormal tonight. Don't you try to tell me." He gave in after my one-sentence verbal assault. "We'll send someone over." However, I don't think that southern guy ever sent anyone. I never saw anyone walk through the hallway for the next 20 minutes. I guess I'll figure it out myself, I thought. Before I left the room, I remembered to grab the baton that sat in the bin in the corner of the room. Opening the door, I peered out, looking left and right as if I were crossing a street, and I headed over to the hallway number 4. Nothing seemed to be out of place though. No doors were open, and all the lights remained off. I guess I've made it this far. Might as well do my second patrol. Through the rest of my patrol, I encountered 2 of the rooms described by Rule 5. I heeded the warning of the rule and simply walked past the room without investigating inside. Those rooms were truly strange though. Walking past the room, it sounded similar to the inside of a populated mall or train station where there was a lot of bustling. I took a quick glance inside one of these rooms as I passed it in the hallway. Through the darkness I could see movement, but I could not relate it to anything I could comprehend. It had the form of a black mass swirling around. Moving on, I walked down a flight of stairs, figuring I'd do an extra good job and continue onward. Everything seemed darker down there, but it was reminiscent of a copy of the ground floor from what I could remember. My feet made a small squishing sound while walking. The floor seemed to be slightly flooded by a thin layer of water. I felt like I had bad night blindness down there. My flashlight seemed to be losing power as well, or something to that extent, because the beam dimmed the further I walked. I smelled old, rotting wood and rusty metal. It was also quite human, like an indoor swimming pool. I felt some of the water from the ground soak my running shoes. My hands were starting to get clammy, and the air seemed to get heavier with each step, compressing my chest, making it hard to breathe. I looked at my watch. It seemed to have stopped working as well. The time remained frozen at 1:07 a.m., but I knew it was way later than that. I stopped where I was and leaned against one of the hallway's walls, pulling out the envelope. I gazed upon the rules. Rule number 12 was quite vague. Rule number 12. You are always being deceived. Remember. This left me quite confused. I flipped over the rules paper. Written in a pronounced bold font sat rule number 15. Rule number 15. Do not go down the stairs. The basement floor does not exist on this building. Upon descending the stairs, your safety cannot be guaranteed. In fact, our company does not know exactly what happens upon descending the stairs. We only know the result. Thus, we do not yet understand how to effectively combat this. You have a limited amount of time to pray to your deity of choice, because you have just entered a portal to the fourth circle of hell. I felt my legs give out a little. I looked to the darkness ahead of me, behind me, all around me. I yelled from fear and backtracked as fast as I could. I jumped up the stairs 3 at a time and hauled absolute butt back to my room. I ripped the lockers in the corner of the room from the wall and barricaded the door. I already tried redialing the phone. No one picked up. I don't know what's approaching me, but I can feel it. It's different than the creature which knocked on the door. My body is in pain, aching and writhing, burning. I can sense it, and it can sense me. It's coming to take me. I can see it in my head, dark and disfigured, eyeless, pale, soulless and satanic. I'm scared. I don't know what to do. I don't understand why I'm here. I don't understand why this is happening to me. Please, whoever may be reading my warning, if you ever agree to a job that seems too good to be true, it is. My name is Hannah, and I'm a patient at Brentworth Hospital, and something horrible is happening. That morning, I was laying in my bed when I heard a loud ruckus out in the hall. I was still in my pajamas as I gingerly lowered myself into my wheelchair. I rolled myself out into the hall only to see 2 men pushing a stretcher out of my neighbor Jen's room. On top of the stretcher lay a body bag. I gasped, causing one of the nurses to notice me. She cleared her throat nervously before doing her best to compose herself. "All patients to your room," she ordered, and I complied. I wheeled back and quickly shut the door, feeling a bit like a child being scolded for stealing candy. I was shocked. I had just had dinner with Jen last night. She had seemed fine, or as fine as any of us are. "Hannah," the raspy voice of Beth, my roommate, called out. She was about my age, in her mid-30s, with scraggly hair and sallow skin. She wheezed as she spoke, tank of oxygen dutifully by her side. She looked wild as she continued. "Hannah, we need to talk." She too was in a wheelchair. She rolled up to me. "I saw something horrible." She coughed uncontrollably before continuing. "Jen didn't die of natural causes. One of the nurses killed her." I let out a gasp. I was shocked at her claim. It seemed outlandish, but Beth had no reason to lie to me. We had grown close in our time together. "What?" How? I said breathlessly. I saw one of the nurses smother Jen with a pillow last night, she said, nervously looking over her shoulder as if somehow the culprit might pounce out of one of the corners in the tiny room. Why? Why would they do that? I asked. I have a theory, Beth said. I couldn't sleep all night, but I was afraid to wake you, so I just pretended to be sleeping. I spent hours looking for a motive, and I think I found one. You know how the staff keeps complaining that the ward doesn't have enough rooms? She waited for my nod. I think they made room. I cringed away from her, but she grabbed my arm. Think about it. Without new patients, the hospital goes under. If you think about it, Jen was the perfect person to kill. She doesn't have a relationship with any of her siblings, and she was very vocal about it. No one to mourn her, nobody to ask questions, and God knows she was a difficult woman, a miserable soul. I was doubtful, but Beth strengthened the argument. I bet you that within a fortnight that room was filled. Just you watch. And she was right. An old woman named Bessie took up the room. What was even more odd, the staff showed no signs of sadness. Well, except for once. A newer nurse was showing signs of distress. She didn't notice me. Neither did the other nurse as she swept down on her. Keep up pretenses, she hissed. If your mask is going to slip, then walk off the ward. You knew what you were getting into. That was when the first nurse noticed me. She gave the other nurse a nudge, and they both faced me with big smiles on their faces. Big, fake smiles on their faces. They tried to make pleasantries with me, and I pretended as if nothing was wrong, but my trust for the nursing staff was gone. One night, Beth had gone ashen. I overheard some of the nurses. Oh God, it's horrible, Hannah. They're planning to kill again. My blood turned to ice as she said this, but she didn't stop there. They said that they were going to clean out room 47B. I almost passed out. That was our room. When? I said urgently. Tonight, she said tearfully. I didn't waste any time. I wheeled to the communal phones and dialed 911, only to get a buzzing sound from the line. Hannah, I heard a sickly sweet voice call out from behind me. Now what do you think you're doing? The phones are shut off at 9. I turned in my chair to see one of the nurses staring down at me. I didn't think. I only reacted. I slammed my wheelchair straight into her legs. She crumbled with a cry of pain. I went as fast as I could and made it to my room before slamming the door. I could hear footsteps running in my direction. Beth, I screamed. Beth, help me hold the door. I could hear the nurses talking, but what they said surprised me. Dang it, Beth is back. Get the doctor. Beth and I looked at each other, confused. What did they mean she was back? Hannah, a male voice called gently through the door. This is Dr. Perry. Hannah, you're safe. Please open the door. No, I screamed. Beth heard your little plan. You're going to kill us just like you killed Jen. Hannah, he said. Beth isn't real. She's a hallucination. I looked over at Beth to share a look of disbelief at this comment. Or at least I tried to. Where Beth had been sitting moments ago was nothing but empty space. Hannah, the doctor continued, you have schizophrenia. It's why you're here. No, I cried. My legs, they don't work. Yes, you were paralyzed when you drove into a crowded street and hit the side of a building. I felt dizzy. But Jen, you killed her. No, he said. Jen killed herself. She was manic depressive, remember? And I did. I couldn't stop crying. I let go of the door and orderlies rushed in with a sedative in hand, shooting me up before I could do anything else. I saw the newer nurse trying to hide a look of horror. "You're doing better," another nurse told her. "Just keep practicing a smile. After all, this is nothing." Just another day at Brentworth Hospital for the criminally insane. Hey friends, thanks for joining me today for this episode of Horror Time Storytime. I hope you enjoyed these stories as much as I did, and I hope that you'll join me for the next Horror Time Storytime, which is coming next Friday, April 16th. If you have any stories of your own that you'd like to share with me for me to read, go ahead and send that to me at reisnernails@outlook.com. Thanks so much for joining me, and I'll see you in the next one.